So I have two sets of watercolour travel palettes, but how do I decide which one to use? In this video I'm going to do a brief review of both the Etchr mini palette and the Winsor Newton Cotman Sketches pocket box. G'day everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kim. I'm an artist and a nature journaler from Australia, and today I'm going to do a mini review where I briefly describe them and then discuss the pros and cons of each. At the end I'll tell you which one I prefer and why. So let's start with the Etchr mini palette. It comes in a handy tin to keep everything together and makes it very portable. It's a little bit hard to open up. You can use the tin as a water container if you like, but because it's metal, I'm not so sure how it will go if it will rust. And I tend to use a water brush, so I don't really need to get this wet. Inside there's a colour wheel, and I've swatched out the Schmincke Horridum watercolours that I use in here, and I've also added a white gouache to the centre as well from Winsor Newton. There are these felt mats that protect the two ceramic plates that are inside. One's for the colours, has 19 wells, and the other one is for mixing and has 7 large wells. There's also a version that's got 37 wells if you prefer more colour choice at the cost of a smaller well. Now let's look at the Winsor Newton Cotman Pocket Sketches box. So this is made out of plastic, and inside there are 12 half pans and 3 mixing areas in the lid itself. There's also room for a tiny little brush that sits here in that gap, but I seem to have lost it somewhere. I've had this set for quite a few years now, and it's lasted me a very long time. I haven't had to refill any of the colours. I do find that a half pan lasts me quite a while, even with regular use. Same with the Etchr mini palette. Even though the wells are quite small, I haven't had to replace any of them or even top them up. They do seem to last quite a long time. Now of course, just like with the Etchr mini palette, you can choose to swap out any of those half pans for a different colour, for a different brand, or mix it up in whatever way you prefer. Now I'm essentially comparing the Etchr mini palette with any watercolour travel kit that comes in a plastic container. There are so many of these available, they just differ in the number of pans, maybe the shape of the pan, whether it's full or half size. They might be able to fit a brush or a sponge or have different mixing area options, but they're all with plastic. What is interesting to me is that I haven't really come across anything else that does a ceramic travel kit like Etchr's mini palette does. Okay, so let's have a look at the pros and cons for each now. Firstly, let's look at the setup. Even though the tin's handy for water, there's still 5 different pieces that you have to unpack. So it can be unwieldy in that sense. Whereas this is just one box. You open it up, it's still one container, so that's easier to move around, especially when you don't have much room. But if you have got a picnic table, for example, I do like to spread out and use this one. In terms of the material, the ceramic palettes are really nice and enjoyable to paint with. So when you're using the ceramic surface for making a puddle of water, a dilute wash, it puddles nicely compared to plastic palettes in that the water doesn't separate. You can see the color very nicely as well. And finally, ceramic's a little bit easier to clean and wipe off than plastic, which can stain quite easily. Of course, that means that this is a lot heavier than the Sketches box, which is plastic. For long trips, I tend to leave this one behind, also because it might break if I have a fall or something. In terms of color choice, the mini palette wins here because you've got 19 compared to 12. You can even get the 37 for the same size. Whereas here, if you want to have more colors, you typically have to increase the size. The half pans are usually the smallest option for plastic palette. The problem with that is that I do find if you've got a big brush or just with any brush, because you're dipping into a very small space, you might damage the hairs of that brush, whereas at least with this one you can use the side of the brush to pick up paint from. With these colors it's much harder to change the position of the color compared to the pans that you can click in and out. And finally, with the mixing areas, definitely the ceramic palette's nicer to use. You've got quite a few spots available to make different colours. 7 is, I would say, quite a lot, a good number, compared to 3 large ones, which tend to fill up quickly. So which one? Alright, I'm going to break my decision up into 3 parts based on how often I use it, my preference, and how practical it is. In terms of frequency, I probably use Winsor Newton the most often because of its ease of handling. It's easy to set up, there's only one piece to figure out where to place around you. Practicality, well, Winsor Newton wins again. It's lightweight, so I can take it on longer trips. I will always leave behind the heavier one if I have to make a decision, and less likely to break. But which one do I prefer to actually paint with? Well, that would be the Etchr mini palette. The ceramic surface does lend itself nicely to making the whole experience more pleasurable in terms of seeing the colour, how much of a wash you've got, and it gives me a wider variety of colours to choose from. Ultimately, I think either travel kit will do the job. I wouldn't rush out to buy the Etchr mini palette if you don't own one, but having said that, I'll probably use this for the rest of my life and always keep it in my bag handy for when I do want to use it. In a way, it's nice to have both. So what about you? Which one would you prefer? Are there any deal breakers here? Comment below. If you're interested in what kind of watercolor setup I use in the studio, then check out this video here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.